and welcome. My name is Elena Carlson, and on behalf of CEES, Citizens for Community Collaboration, I would like to welcome everyone to this town hall event. Thank you so much for being here and being active citizens in our democracy. I welcome and express so much gratitude to our state congressman for also being here. Thank you. David Hinkins is our state senator with House District 27. He represents Carbon, Emery, Grand, San Juan, Utah, and Wasatch counties. Carl Albrecht is a state representative, and in Moab, he roughly represents this side of Main Street, which is District 70. Christine Watkins, a state representative representing District 69, who sort of represents that side of Mill Creek Drive, etc., and Spanish Valley, regrets that she is unable to be here due to a prior commitment. I'd like everyone to take a moment to look at the sheet that you received when you came in. It describes our schedule for tonight's town hall. We'll begin with welcome and introductions. And then there are a series of questions at the bottom that they will begin by answering. We will then take a brief 10-minute break and begin with our questions from the audience. On the back of the page, it describes instructions for the questions for the audience section. We'll ask each of you, if you are interested in asking a question, to sit in these first two rows. And we have two ladies over here in the corner. They could stand, and they will be the audience question facilitators, and they will help as each person comes up to ask their question. Then at the bottom of this page, you'll see that there are instructions for this will be on YouTube, as well as the congressional candidate forum that we held 2 weeks ago is also on YouTube, and you may find it there. We were so impressed by how cordial and kind and respectful people were at our candidate Congressional Assembly 2 weeks ago. And we welcome debate at this event, but we would prefer not to have argument. So please help us to make this a civil conversation. Thank you so much for being here. And I will pass it over to our moderator.
Welcome, everyone. Tonight we will begin with questions that were submitted ahead of time to our representatives, and they will have a chance to answer them. I'm just looking here where the questions are. Okay. And you can follow along on your sheet. We'll go one question at a time. We'll hear from each candidate, and that will be the first portion of our evening. Then we'll have our break, and then we'll move into your questions. So the first question that we have for Albrecht and Hinkins tonight is, how do you collaborate productively with others in the state legislature with different views? And whoever would like to go first could take that first.
Well, thank you, and I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for the invitation to come down. I'm David Hinkins, and I live up in Farron, Utah, so I'm not too far away. I mean, in rural Utah, it's all relative, you know, too far away. If you live in Salt Lake and you live 2 hours away, you'd, be a long ways away. But as you all know, it's a long ways to travel back and forth. The way I collaborate with them is probably, I happen to be the chairman of appropriations for natural resources, and so to be able to get in that position is to be able to get along with the president of the Senate, of course, and the leadership, and to be supportive of them to some degree to where I am able to be appointed to be the chairman of appropriations for natural resources. And of course, it's hard to, when you realize that I represent 6 counties and 5 of them are basically rural, other than Utah County is the only one that's not rural. And you have Salt Lake County that's got 11 senators, and you've got Utah County that's got 8. We're outnumbered. And so rural legislators, we're getting less. There's basically 3 of us that's in the Senate that live in rural Utah, one of them being Senator Okerlund, who lives near Monroe, and he's also our majority whip. And so we started out several years ago. I've been in the Senate now for 9 years, and what we done is we got a rural caucus together, and we stuck together. We voted as a group, and that's how we've been successful. Senator Van Tassel, and so we kind of vote as a block. So when leadership positions come up for it, we get together, and so they know that they've got to come to the rural, because the metropolitan people are always divided. And so it basically we're the swing votes. There's about 4 or 5 of us, and so we're able to do that, and so we're able to swing a lot more leverage than we would normally by sticking together. And so I think that's been our best way to do it. So.
And I'm Carl Albrecht. I'm from Richfield, and I represent most of Sevier County, a sliver of Sand Peak County, all of Emery County except Green River, and the west side of Moab. The boundary line's still disputed, but glad to be here. I've been down here several times since last year. I enjoy coming down here and visiting with folks. And so I'm the rookie up there. I don't have the experience that Senator Hinkins has, but I can tell you that sometimes we don't even agree with the Senate on the House side, and sometimes we don't agree with the executive branch. And so, you have a bill that's arguable on both sides, and it goes to conference committee. Sometimes we settle our differences in a conference committee on a bill. But, I've found out that we're pretty fortunate to live in Utah where we do, because we go up there, people from all walks of life, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and others, and we balance the budget in 45 days. And that's pretty impressive when you compare what we do in Utah to other states in the Union. We take care of business in 45 days, and it's an amazing process. It's kind of like making sausage. You don't want to watch it, but it's pretty good when it's all done. So we work pretty close. As Senator Hinkins said, in the House we have a larger group of rural legislators, but we also have a larger group, so the percentage is probably about the same. But I've enjoyed it this past year, and I enjoy representing you folks, and hopefully I can do a good job for you.
Great, thank you. Our second question tonight is about Grand County's reputation. Many in our area believe that our county is adversely affected by the opinions about our community held by the state government and its organizations. What can you do and we do to improve the situation? How can we become more influential in decisions made at the state level?
Okay, well, I hope you don't just feel like the only stepchild in the group, because all rural counties basically get treated the same. So I don't know what they mean by the reputation, but we're not treated as equals. We get scraps. The major funding goes to the metropolitan area. The jobs go to the metropolitan area. Anytime there's tax incentives, it goes to companies that's going to be willing to locate in the big cities where they have the money to entice them. And until we can get that changed, we've done a 7-county coalition, and that's one of the reasons that we try to do that, is to try to get a little bit, like I said about the rural caucus. Rural senators try to get together. There's 4 or 5 of us that got together. We voted as a block, and that's what the rural counties are going to have to do. If you want to be heard, we're going to have to get together and have, like the 6-county coalition, the Sevier County and Sand Peak County and Carbon and Emery and Grand, and we got to unify so that we'll never outnumber them. But we can a little bit, at least we need to be numbered, and we need to at least to try to get some of it. We should have a 4-lane highway from here all the way to Salt Lake City. I mean, they spend more money on retaining walls, off-ramps that they put like ducts and stuff in the cement and stuff. They spend more money decorative than they actually do on our roads. And so we've got to get together as rural communities and bond. is up to our county commissioners, and it's up to our county councils to all to get together and try to get together and vote as a block and try to be as a block. Because, you know, we can't be divided and go forces against the Wasatch Front. There's just too many of them. But we got to be united in our direction of what we want to do. We need to get jobs. We need to get our roads. We need to get as much attention on our rural roads as they on the metropolitan. And so anyway, I think that's probably the big thing. I think try to get unified is what I would say as a county council, to get with our rural county commissioners and stuff like that, and let's try to get together and be on this, have a directive and an agenda. And they do it through UAC, but a lot of times the people that's on the UAC are also the metropolitan counties that are involved in it. So we kind of got to get separated from them and kind of do a little strategizing. So that's the direction I would take. What's that, ma'am? Utah Association of Counties. It's an association that they have. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think the good senator hit the nail on the head. You know, in rural Utah, we've got to unite. I don't know. This question kind of caught me off guard. Evidently, there's some down here that think that, or perceive that you have a reputation that the state doesn't like. My gosh, they all recreate down here. When I'm going up the freeway to Salt Lake City, all I see is Jeeps with bumper stickers that says, "I love Moab." So, you know, you've advertised it, they've come, and you know, I would suggest, this is what and we told this to the Grand County Council last week when we met with them down here. Get unified in your positions, both in the city and the county, so that when you come up to the session, a bill's being debated in committee or wherever, that you're there and represented and testify in those committees, because that's where important things are said and senators and representatives' minds are influenced and changed. So I encourage you to, you know, debate it down here, whatever the cause may be, whatever the issue may be. Get unified in your position, both from the city and the county, and then go up there and come in and talk to us. You know, we'll come out of the session and visit with you, but come to the committee meetings where those critical bills are discussed and testify. We always give the public time to testify, so that's important. So come on up, but get unified in your positions down here before you do. If you come up there with fractured positions, then you're not going to be received as well, because the county might say this, the city might say that. Get unified in your positions.
Just a quick follow-up question. When and where does that happen?
Okay, our session starts last Monday in January, and it ends around St. Patrick's Day in about the middle of March, around the 14th or something of that. So we're in session for 45 days, last week of January, all of February, and the first couple weeks of March. And we always invite you up there. I mean, we really love to see people from down home up there, and I would like to make a correction on my thing before I forget. This phone number is a state phone that was assigned to me. I never use it. But my personal phone I have with me all the time, and if you could write that, if you got a pencil, if you change that to 435-749-2828. So.
Mine's correct. Give me a call or text me anytime.
Great. Our next question is about energy and economy. What is your vision for revitalizing rural Utah's economies in a possible post-coal or post-oil era with transition to renewable energy resources?
Okay, well, I've been accused a lot of being opposed to renewable energy resources, and that's not the case at all. I am opposed to subsidies, of subsidizing it, and so I want to make that clear. The reason I'm opposed to subsidizing any subsidies as far as I'm concerned, but the way we do renewable tax credit is on tax credits, your income taxes. Well, guess what? Who gets all the income taxes in the state of Utah, whether it's corporate taxes, personal taxes? Guess who? Your education. They get 100% of it. So every time you offer tax credits, guess where you're taking the money from? Education. What are we trying to do? We do everything in the world we can to try to get more money into education, and we turn around and we give tax incentives to corporations, to individuals that takes money away from our kids. That's not right. And so I am opposed to any types of tax credits. If they want to come up with something else, fine, but income tax credits, where it's 100% on the back of the children, I do not support it at all. But I think it should be standalone. I think there's room for renewables. I think there's clean energy. I have no problem with it. I'm an investor in a company that runs off hydrogen trucks. The only pollution off of that is water vapors. Absolutely no emissions of benzines or anything else. And in Utah, we get accused a lot for energy, our energy polluting the air, but you know what it is? It's like 80% is vehicles and aircraft in Salt Lake Valley and stuff. Industry is about 15%, and municipal and industrial stuff is probably about 5 to 10%. So when you look at it, the vehicles are the ones polluting, and we all drive. And so until we can get to electric vehicles and to hydrogen vehicles, that's just the way it's going to be. So I'm in favor of it. I'm an investor in that sort of stuff, and so I am all in favor of clean energy and clean air, clean water, the whole works. Thanks.
The good senator comes from a county that has 2 coal plants. I served in the utility industry for 40 years. I was CEO of Garcane Power for 23 years. So you can call me a coal guy if you want to, but I have solar on my home, okay? And I love it. My bill to Rocky Mountain Power is $8.93 a month for the minimum. But I'm sure glad when the sun goes down that I'm connected to the grid. And the grid has got to have some base loading function, whether that be from coal or natural gas, because the wind and the solar, as you well know, only comes when the sun shines and the wind blows, and the wind has to be a certain speed. But the key to all of these renewables is battery storage. And until we develop a commercial grade storage for wind and solar farms so that it can be produced during the day when the sun shines and the wind blows, and then stored and put into the grid at a later point when people's demand requires it, that's the big key for renewables, is battery storage. And they are making progress. We'll see what happens. But until that happens, we've got to have a base loading system to carry the demands of our country and our state. And that's got to come from coal or natural gas or nuclear. I'd love to see more nuclear, frankly. But, you know, we all seem to be scared of it. But in the long run, it's cheaper and it's less polluting than the other 2 combined. So that's kind of where I stand on the energy and the economy. There's really a duck curve, and I don't know if you've read about the duck curve. You know, you got the head up here and it comes down, and then there's a flat part, and then the tails come up. Well, the duck curve is caused by generation of wind and solar during the day when it's flat. And there's times when Rocky Mountain Power will buy renewable energy from Southern California and Nevada and pay negative price just to get it off their hands because it's so prevalent down there. Now, California's made some bad decisions in energy as we go back to Enron and some of those situations, but I'm kind of like the good senator. I don't like subsidies, but we're not going to graduate from coal or natural gas anytime soon. But battery is the key, storage, so that we can use it when we need it. Because electricity is not like anything else. You can't store it until you need it. It's got to be on the grid, so when you flip the switch, it's there. So that's my position.
Next question has to do with jobs. What is being done to support the governor's stated goal of creating 25,000 jobs in rural Utah?
Well, the thing of it is with me is this 25,000 jobs came with no money. It didn't come with anything to help us. It came with a bureaucracy up there of GOED and everything else, a big, basically a corporate headquarters that comes out and do, I'm going to say this, a dog and pony show to rural Utah, but they're not really attaching anything that's going to help us. I mean, there's no funding to help the counties. I mean, I don't know. I think I don't think the state should be involved in creating jobs anyway. I mean, you know, the only jobs they're going to create is more government jobs. And I think, personally, I would like to see, I don't know, just some money or something to help the counties to try to take, well, we're playing on an unequal field. Up in Salt Lake, they can give tax credits to all these corporations coming in, and I'm against that anyway, because here you got income tax credits or even property tax credits. Our little counties, Grand County, probably 90%, 95% publicly owned. So you got 5 to 10% of the people paying for the whole thing of the county. You know, the public lands, the government gives a payment in lieu of taxes, but they're not paying a fair amount of their taxes. I mean, they tie up all this land, but then they don't give us a budget as a rural county to be able to be operative. So you got 95% of the people paying, you know, they got 5% of the land, but they're paying 95% of the taxes. I mean, you get $1 million a year about, maybe a little bit more than that, Mary, is that correct, from PILT? $1.2 million for PILT payments to the county. I think it's around $1 million. All the rural counties are pretty close to about $1 million. But it's probably like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3%, maybe 5% of their budgets. In Paiute County, it might be 10% of their budget or 15%, but even at that, the rest of us are the ones having to pay the budgets. And so for somebody that has all the land tied up, they should be paying an equitable, at least half of the taxes in the county should be budgeted by the 95% owners of the property. And so anyway, that's my thing about it. Until we start getting that, until we start big corporations having all the incentives and stuff like that, and there again, it's taken away from education. Every time you give corporate taxes, incentives, it's taken it away from our education. Every time property taxes, we have to have all the property taxes we can get. We cannot give up hardly any property taxes as incentives to corporations to come here, because how do you put in the services if you can't tax their property? You know, Lehi's got a little problem up there on that Silicon Slope. Yeah, they got a lot of jobs, but guess what? They don't have much tax base. You know why? Because they've given it all away. They've given like 20 and 25-year credits to all these corporations. So they're not paying taxes. So all this infrastructure, this new exchange that's going to cost $200 or $300 or $400 million, guess who's going to pay for it? It's going to come out of the transportation department, because the city in that, you know, doesn't have the funding to do it, because they give away all these tax incentives to get these companies to come here. Us little counties can't do it because we don't have that big of a tax base. Until we get the government to pay their equitable share, I think it's going to continue. So I think it's a good incentive to try to get 25,000 jobs. I hope we do. I just don't see that there's anything that's really beneficial that they've kind of come and helped our county council or our county commissions to help attract these corporations or these jobs to come here. So that's my take.
Well, I don't know how many of you went to when they come down to Moab and put on the dog and pony show, as the senator calls it, but he's pretty spot on this, because I sit on the Economic Development and Workforce Services Committee, and we had Val Hale, who's the head of the GOED office, come in and give a report on some of the programs that GOED's been over the last few years. Take, for example, tourism. Moab's big on tourism. Vicki Varela, the director of the Office of Tourism, promoted the Mighty Five. Well, the Mighty Five has worked. I mean, we got lines into Arches, and we got lines into Bryce and Zions. And so she met her goal 2 years earlier as far as visitation numbers than she should have done. Well, Val says we got $1 million left there that we're going to turn back to the state budget. Somebody else had a program that they'd met their goal, and so they had $1 million. So I pressed my button and I said, Val, let's turn that $2 million into the $25,000 or 25,000 jobs program. The room kind of went silent. Senator Hinkins is right. You know, they incentivize those big companies, and they end up locating somewhere between Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah County, and the point of the mountain's getting to be ridiculous, and we're putting more money in transportation there. But if we don't leave Salt Lake City on Friday night by 3 o'clock, we just will stay until 8. And I tell those people in committees, I say, you don't need any more jobs up here on the Wasatch Front. You're so congested now, it's ridiculous. So I'd like to see some of that money that GoAhead has saved, at least $2 million, go into this 25,000 jobs thing. Now, I know that they're saying, okay, they're going out to all the big businesses in the Salt Lake Valley and in those 4 counties up there and saying, okay, you got the jobs. We don't have the jobs in southern Utah, but we got the people that could fill them. Well, one example was Select Health. They opened up the call center in Price, and there was 50 or 60 jobs, pretty good jobs created with benefits. So I think what we need to do is train people so that they can work for some of these companies and telecommute, you know, over the computer, because that's what it's coming to. And I think there's a lot of companies, you know, they say they're going to those big companies and saying, what can you do for rural Utah? Well, some of the recreational folks from the retailers, outdoor retailers, they need to locate in Moab, Utah, and Kanab, Utah, and some of those areas. Put some skin in the game, and you know they're going to come back and recreate because nobody's got the beauty that Utah does. And so why not manufacture those products here?
I want to add to this a little bit, now that I think about it. You know, if they would, instead of trying to incentivize or to entice all these big companies to come in from other states and compete against our local people, they should be doing something to help our local people. They've already got skin in the game. They've been here for maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 or 100 years. And we should help them people, the ones that's already got business here, the ones that's already come and proven themselves and that already got employees and taking care of their people. Them are the ones that should get incentives, and they're the ones that should be getting help. They're the ones that should, if you hire people, I mean, that's the only way they're going to do it. You're not going to entice people to come that don't want to be here. And if they do, guess what? The minute their incentives are out, they're out of here. And we need to help the people that's already here, established businesses, and that's who the people we need to help, is the ones that's already stepped forth and it's already committed to the community, and that's already a part of the community. They're the ones that, and let them expand their business. Let's help them get more market share worldwide or however it might be. But that's the ones that we should be helping, not enticing some big corporate company to come into our area. Let's take care of the local people. That's the way I'd look at it.
Well, the next question sort of ties into economy and so forth, is about transient room tax. Do you support legislation that would allow Grand County to exercise more discretion on how it spends its transient room tax, which then could allow us to spend less than the currently required minimum amount on advertising?
Yeah, I think there's about 3 or 4 items that they can spend their money on. I think that should be opened up. I think the local elected officials know better what their community needs than just a statewide broadcasted thing that's saying, okay, you can spend money on these 3 things. Other than that, like say, for instance, you guys need a new sewer system. Well, it's not acceptable. You can put in a landfill to take care of the garbage, but you can't take care of the rest of it. You know, I just think that they shouldn't tie your hands with it. I think they should be able to be the ones that put it into their budgets and use it how they need to do it, because I made a statement with the county council the other day. You can spend all this money on advertising, but let me tell you what, when they come here and they have a bad experience because they don't have the facilities, they don't have the infrastructure, they won't be back as a rule. You know, the people will come, and if they don't have a nice stay and things like that, you know, I think that they need to be able to have let the community decide. You know, let them have nice parks if they want it, and if people come here, they have a nice. I mean, you guys got the biggest park in the state, you know, with the arches and all, and you know, Canyonlands and everything. But I think that we've got to allow, to open it up to where they can use a little bit more discretion as our county council and as our city councils and stuff like that. So I would be in favor of allowing them to do it a little bit. You guys don't need to be advertised. When I travel around, you always identify as a rural. You guys don't have to, but like if you live in Emery County, you don't say you live in Barron or Orangeville, Castro. You say you're from Emery County because nobody knows what cities you're talking about. Moab, you're one of the few that they actually know. If somebody said, I'm from Grand County, they'd say, well, where's that at? Well, Moab's in Grand County. I'd be able to identify. You go over, I went to Taiwan, and everybody knows where Moab is, but Moab or Salt Lake, but they don't know where anything else is in Utah. So you guys are very well known, very well respected, and I think that's a great thing you got going for you. I wish that Emery County had the same, but we don't yet. Hopefully we can work on it.
Ditto. We talked about this with the Grand County Council last week, and yeah, I agree there ought to be other ways to spend that money that would help you folks. You've got some infrastructure needs because of all the tourism, and so that law ought to be broadened. I don't represent Wayne County, but I grew up there. The little town of Torrey's grown a lot, and they had a water crisis a while back when the main line off the mountain broke, and all the motels on the east side of Torrey were out of water for 5 days. Well, I got a hold of the lieutenant governor and I said, hey, these folks, they're losing tourist dollars right now, and they've only got 6 months to make their payments. So let's get some help down here for them. Another thing is all of those motels in Wayne County provide about 75 to 80% of the trash that goes in their landfill, and their compactor was down. So yeah, there ought to be other ways to spend that money, and you folks have identified some, and so has your county council, and we just need to change the law.
Next question is about USU Moab campus. Do you support the extension of the USU Moab campus? If so, do you support or sponsor a $5 million legislative request from USU to support the development of a 4-year destination campus in Moab?
Well, I for sure do. I actually serve on the committee, the Appropriations Committee. In the Senate, we serve on 2 committees. I serve on the Natural Resources, which I'm the chairman of, but I also serve on the Infrastructure Committee, which is part, the Transportation Committee and stuff. And so I serve on 2 of the best ones, and of course, IGG Committee. Basically, we are the ones that vote on which college buildings get funded and stuff like that. So I hopefully have some influence that I can, and I would be glad to sponsor some legislation to be able to get this $5 million for a building. But one thing we got to do is getting a building is going to be awfully nice, but you know what we need to do? We need to have affordable housing for our students. And I think the way that we could actually help more than anything is to try to get some outside money. We're working with SITLA to try to get, some more land freed up for campus and stuff like that. But we really do need to, and I think we can get some outside money, to private money to invest in it, to put in affordable housing for the students as well as for workers here in town. That's one of the issues that we have here, is that a lot of the workers and stuff are having to commute from Green River or even Grand Junction. And I think that's very important that we try to get some housing that's affordable for students as well as for our employees. A lot of the towns, a lot of places, I know in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that if you can't hire anybody, if you have a restaurant or hotels and stuff, you can't hire anybody unless you have housing for them. And it's going to come to that possibly if we don't do it. And a lot of these businesses can't afford not to hire employees if they have to come up with the housing and stuff like that, and it's not around. And so I think we really need to work on that to try to get the housing as much as the building. But I am very supportive of helping the education, because the one thing about it, if our kids, and I've got my own kids, once they leave to go away to college, a lot of times they don't find their way back because they find good jobs. And they come back and visit maybe once or twice a year, but when they got and I didn't really mind that until they started having grandkids. Then I really minded it. And so I'm glad to have them back, but I really do think that have the opportunities. A lot of people, They need to be able to keep their jobs. A lot of people can't move away to Salt Lake and go to college and stuff like that, especially if they got a little family and they've been displaced and they need to further their education. They really need to have that campus here where they can continue their jobs and be with their family, their wife and their children and stuff like that. And so I'm very supportive of it, and especially to have a 4-year degree to be able to get continued education for people that have got, like I said, jobs here, but they can't afford to quit that job and go try to find a job. And then, because they never find their way back, it seems like. So I'm very supportive.
We talked about this at the Grand County Council meeting last week, and my first cousin, Stan Albrecht, used to be the president of Utah State, and he has really promoted outreach and the land grant policy of outreaching into the rural areas, and so I would be very supportive of this. I think it would not only help Moab, but the whole southeastern part of the state. I will tell you that I met with Snow College last week with the appropriations chairs for higher ed, Senator Vickers and Representative Grover, and you know, everybody's got their hand out for money, but of course Snow College is a little different situation than USU. They're the only 2-year college in the state and kind of have a little different mission, but a 4-year program, a building down here so you could attract some students, and all of southeastern Utah would benefit, and then some programs that are maybe some education programs that are unique to your area that could be taught here, could be approved by the Board of Regents. You know, there's certain programs I think that USU could offer down here that maybe couldn't offer anywhere else in the state. So, yeah, I'm very supportive of that, and I hope maybe we could run a bill to get that done.
Healthcare policy is next. What is the future of Medicaid in Utah? What does the future of healthcare policy and delivery look like in Utah?
Well, you know, right now it's the second largest item on our budget is healthcare. Education being number one, healthcare being number two. But healthcare is growing faster than education, and of course, you know, a lot of the money that could have gone into education is now going to healthcare. As an employer, I've been an employer. I started my business 41 years ago, and I furnish all the insurance for all my employees. I furnish all their health care. And when I first started out, it was like $198, I think it was, for a family. And that was 1976. And now I've got some of my employees, of course, who are a lot older, and but it's like $2,600. It's gone from $198 to $2,600. And I think we need to do something to help employers to help with health care, because, you know, as a corporation, the reason I made that choice because it was deductible as a corporation to furnish health care for my employees, the premiums. But if I was to take and pay them extra money, say I give them like $10 an hour or more or whatever to do their own health care, it's not deductible to them, but it is as an employer. But as an employee, it's not. And so we actually, if we're not going to, as employees, if we're not going to take care of our employees as employers, then we probably need to work something out with the government where they can use federal deductions, not state deductions, but federal deductions on their health care as individuals. They should be able to deduct it. They shouldn't have to pay it after taxes. And I think until we do that, it's not going to be affordable to the average person. But if we need to help the employers, or give them more incentive of some sort. I don't know what it is, tax breaks of some sort if they furnish health care for their employees. And I think that's the direction we should go as a nation personally, but that's my opinion.
When you're in the legislature, you get on one appropriations committee and two standing committees. I was on appropriations for social services my first session. I've since been switched to natural resources, but you can't believe the need. I was requested, okay. Well, that's fine, but I can tell you that in social services, those last 2 weeks, and we met every day of the session for the first most committees just meet 2 or 3 times a week. We met every day. There is so much need in the state for all different types of social service programs. And as the good senator said, you know, second largest budget, and not that far behind education, really. But I know Governor Herbert is in D.C., I think tomorrow, with some other governors talking to a committee about Medicaid, and I know the state made an application to maybe get about $100 million that we can direct as we see fit in the state of Utah. We're hoping that maybe the Trump administration approves that. So we'll see where that goes, but it's a tough issue. It's got to be addressed. Families are hurting because of health insurance costs. I know when I was the CEO of a company, we had about 65 employees, and health care costs went up every year, and it limits you as to what you can do with your other benefits to attract good employees. So, yeah, there's a real need there, but I'm hopeful that the state will get this $100 million so that they can direct it in different ways to help our programs. I'm a strong believer that we can do it better than the feds, so if they give us that, I think we can do it better. Thank you.
We have 2 more questions, and then we'll get to audience questions. The next one is about water resources. How can we all help Utah manage its water resources? We live in a desert ecosystem vulnerable to drought and climate change, and we are a state that is growing rapidly. How do we manage and reconcile the 2 realities?
Well, as rural Utah, we're going to have to be able to hang on to our water. You know, water always used to flow downhill, but now it flows to money. The Uinta Basin, of course, with the Central Utah Water Project, they found their water resources being taken and sent to the Utah Valley and to Salt Lake Valley. When they put in the pipeline, they done the tunnels and stuff into Strawberry Reservoirs. They just, you know, and I'm okay with that because it helped the growth. Salt Lake wouldn't be where it's at today. They'd really be in a water shortage had they not taken the water from the Uinta Basin and moved it to the Utah Valley. And us also St. George. I know a lot of people may be opposed to the water resources coming out of the Colorado River and being diverted to St. George. And I'm okay with it personally because I think if we don't do it, St. George will cease to grow. And we have those water rights. They belong to the state of Utah. And so we're entitled to that. I am not in favor of the state providing the funding for it. I think that can come from either from water users, and the only way you really regulate water and save water is to charge for it. There's a lot of things that, I mean, the more you charge, the less they use. And that's pretty well a proven factor that, you know, if you get free water, you use all you want. But if you start paying for it, you limit yourself because of your budgets. And so that's the only way you can really do it. But I think that we really do need to work on infrastructure throughout the state so that we can have our water, you know, we ran bills to allow the cities to hold water rights without having to put it to beneficial use. Because if you're an agriculture producer, you have to put it to beneficial uses or you lose it. It goes downstream to other places. And so we've allowed industry, which I'm not really as supportive of, but for municipal, because you know you got to plan for growth, and so if you can buy water shares now from willing buyers, willing sellers, and be a willing buyer, it's nice to be able to hold that because you never know how you're going to expand. You know, some towns have really grown up and some haven't, but I think that they have to have the ability to lease it back to those that are in agriculture, so that the cities can hold it, but it can be utilized, and not like Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is a big holder of water. And they are basically extorting it to the other towns around there, that they're actually charging them pretty high fees in order to utilize their water. They're allowing some of the other cities like Sandy and stuff and Bluffdale and stuff, so they're actually making money off of their water, which I guess it's okay, but I'm not sure if it's ethical for them to do that, to hold other cities hostage by charging, you know, more than what it, I don't know. I shouldn't get into that type of politics, nothing to do with me, but still, I think that we've allowed them to hold the water, but, when there's other cities, I don't think they have to hold them hostage. I think they should give them a fair value so that a person that lives in Bluffdale is not paying 3 times the amount of somebody that lives in Salt Lake because they have title to the water, even though they're being utilized. So I know in St. George, there's people, there's a lot of money out there. I think it's like $17 trillion that's sitting on the sidelines. It's not into the stock market right now nationwide because they're looking for places to put their money. It's like with transportation, we figure that we should have to do it on the backs of the taxpayers when there's actually companies out there that's willing to invest money into infrastructure as long as they get a reasonable return, and we also give them, the tax breaks that they get, that the interest that they get is not taxable federally. And so I think we, need to continue to do that, especially for big pipeline projects like they may have from Bear River, as well as the pipeline to St. George. It should be done with people that are willing to invest in it, not off the backs of the taxpayers.
There's a couple other items we need to look at too, and they're tied together. We talked about energy earlier and coal-fired plants. Up in my district over in Sevier County, the headwaters of the Sevier River originate up around Panguitch and Panguitch Lake, Cedar Mountain, and flow all the way to Delta. The IPP project is actually going to convert to gas by 2025, and they'll use less water. The same could happen if we get battery storage and wind and solar become more palatable for on-peak. Those plants in Emery County use a lot of water for cooling. So there's going to become some water available if we can get some battery storage and eliminate some of the usage that's going towards coal and natural gas. Right now in the state of Utah, particularly the IPP plant that's coming up in 2025 and converting to gas. There'll be a lot of water that was bought up by Rocky Mountain or the Intermountain Power Project, and the gas plant's not going to use near as much. So that water is going to come on the market out of the Sevier River drainage, and the high bidder, I suppose, will get it. I don't know whether some of the users downstream right now in Sevier County, they have what they call the Paiute Canal and the Sevier Canal, and those Paiute users out of Paiute Reservoir, they're done with water for this year. Even though we had the bumper year. The other issue I think that ties into water and drought and climate change, if you will, is all these forest fires burning. Where does our watershed come from? It comes from the mountains. And if we burn down that watershed like we did between Bryan Head and Panguitch Lake, that affects watershed for years. Could happen out here on the LaSalle's. It's happening all over in Montana. I just read something today that Montana's had like 1,700 fires. They're up to almost 1 million acres burned this year. Yet all the publicity's going to Harvey and Irma as natural disasters. So, man, we got to take care of our watersheds, and that gets back to how do you take care of the forests? We quit logging. We've had a drought, of course, but it's all tied together. We got to protect it all, or we don't have the watershed. That fire Bryan Head to Panguitch Lake's one of the premier fisheries in the state of Utah and the country. Grows trout really fast. People come from all over the west to fish there. Well, after the fire, they got the summer monsoons and all that black stuff off the hillsides run into Panguitch Lake. We had to hustle to get aerators to put on the lake to infuse oxygen into the lake to survive some of the fish. And the folks up there that run businesses, well, they're just out, because people don't want to go up there and see that bare side hill with all that black stuff running in. And on down the river into Panguitch, the farmers, when they turned on their sprinklers, were getting this black gunk out of their sprinklers. So it affects everybody. We got to learn to take care of our resources, especially our watersheds. It's critical. We're the second driest state in the nation.
Alcohol-wise, we're the driest.
Okay, one final prepared question, and then we'll take a short break. Education. When and how is Utah going to start funding its schools and teachers adequately in order to better support our children's education?
Well, I talked about that a little bit on tax credits. When you start giving away all these free tax credits, it sounds great, until you realize who it's coming off of the backs of the children. When you start giving corporate taxes, individual tax breaks, especially on state taxes. And so both my daughters are school teachers, and so I hear about needing more money for education all the time. I'm very supportive of doing what we can to support our school kids and our children and stuff. As far as if you ask people if they want to pay more taxes, they'll all tell you no. And because the thing is, they're going to talk about doing a tax, increased income taxes, maybe go from like 5 to 6 or 7%. But you know something? The legislature will still take that money. You might go ahead and get taxed more. They'll raise your taxes 7%. But guess what? Somehow they'll end up taking money that they're giving to it now. And they say, well, they ain't going to need this money because they just voted themselves a tax increase. So they'll take that money that they were going to do there, and it might end up going to some good cause like Medicaid and Medicare, because there's a million good causes that you can throw money at in this state. Transportation, recreation. So the legislature will take and divert other money that's been going there. So everybody says, well, that's going to end up with more money there, but in the long run, it probably won't. And so I don't know. One of the problems we have is we're pretty much 66% federally owned. And until the federal government starts paying their fair share of taxes on this property, they're the ones that should be funding our education. Because, they're absentee, and that's just more money that was going to take out of our federal dollars to do it, but we're giving a lot of money to other countries. And I think we should be able to give some of it back to our own country. And that's, kind of my perspective of it. When, especially your county, you guys, how do you tax yourself when you only have 5 or 6% of the property that's taxable? And all the rest is controlled by the federal government. So it's a tough deal. I don't know how we're going to do it. Grand County always has issues with, and poor little Paiute County, they're even worse. They don't have any budget for education and stuff. And if it wasn't for the equalization of rural schools, our rural school districts would be a lot worse off. The way they take money now is that the main over the money from the income taxes, they take 10%, they divide it between the school districts, the 42 school districts. Otherwise, little counties like Paiute County wouldn't hardly have any money if it wasn't for that equalization that we have. And our state constitution guarantees that every kid in the state of Utah should have the same opportunities. Now, we know they're not going to have the exact same because they don't have all the recreation facilities that we have in rural Utah that they have in Salt Lake. They don't have all the clubs and things that they're entitled to and stuff like that. But sometimes our rural education, our kids get a better education being in the great outdoors than they would be in being grown up in sidewalks and streets. There's no dirt to play in or nothing. It's just I don't know how you talk what an equal education is, but we do need to do something. But I said the legislature will find ways to divert money sometimes, and it's all of goodwill, because there's a lot of times they're good at lobbying, but there's a lot of places that are good at lobbying money, and everybody said there's a lot of needs, and there's a lot of we're all getting older, and there's we need to get our kids educated. I got 14 grandkids, and so it's a very important issue to me is that my grandkids get educated so they can take care of themselves, so I don't have to do it myself or take care of them for them. And so I really appreciate the education system. The teachers work hard. We've got a great education program. We get a bigger bang for our buck than any other state in the union. There's states that throws a lot of money into their budgets, and their children don't compete with our children. And so I'm grateful for the teachers that we do have. I know that they're underpaid and overworked, but I just hope we can figure something out. One of the things that we have is our trust fund that has over $2 billion in it, and so that most of it comes from the extraction industry, the timber industries and stuff like that. And so we need to figure out more ways to probably put more money into that fund, and so we can, grow it more, and eventually when interest rates do go up, which right now it doesn't make the kind of money it could, but if you figure interest rates were up at 7 or 8% interest, these funds would be making, when you got $2 billion, it would be a big income, and it would go a long ways in education, because they're putting about $64 million into education out of that fund now, and probably getting like half or 1% interest, where it's at right now. So when you think about it, how much that would double if you could 7 times that amount, that would help education immensely.
Yeah, the state trust lands just announced today that that $64 million was a record amount. I think previous amount was $47 million, and that was because of the constitutional amendment that we all voted on that put earnings plus interest back. And so it was a big increase to the schools. But getting back to this Our Schools Now initiative that's out there gathering signatures, they'll get their signatures. And then it'll be on the ballot in 2018, November of 2018. And I guess there'll be a lot of arguments both ways, because what they're proposing is a 0.45 of 1%, not quite a half, on sales tax, and a 0.45 on income tax. And if you go home and calculate that out, that's about a 20% tax increase for you on what you're paying now with the state structure the way it is. So, my wife was an educator. She just barely retired. She gives me a hard time on this all the time. But as the good senator said, there's lots of places to spend the money. Now, their proposal is if they get the $700 million, 85% of that would go to public ed and 15% to higher ed. Do we continue to increase funding through a tax increase? That's going to be an interesting vote, I think, by the people. That's the last thing they want to do is have their taxes raised. You got a pretty good school system down here. I've met with your board a couple of times, and they've come up to the legislature. There's always need for more money, and I think the rural schools do a pretty good job considering what they get. You had a really good superintendent. Now he's gone. I don't know who your new one is. I haven't met him and talked to him yet, but for all the money that we do spend on education, and people say that's the lowest, number 50, we get the 9th best return. So God bless our teachers and our administrators and our students and our parents for teaching those kids how to study and learn and do things the way they ought to be. We get the 9th best results nationwide. I'm not saying we don't need any more money, but I'm just saying it's going to be interesting on this Our Schools Now initiative. If you look at who's promoting that, they're all pretty well-to-do folks. Gail Miller, Scott Anderson, some of those folks, they make a lot more money than a lot of us here in this audience. So, thank you.
I'd like to add to that, those same people, though, that are the ones that are advocating more tax dollars for us, they're also the ones that use a lot of these income tax credits for their own businesses and stuff like that. So they're not as, they could do a lot themselves by not using all them credits if they really want money to go to education, but they utilize all the tax credits they can as well. One thing I would like to add to that, though, is that if there are successful in tax cuts, federal tax cuts, I would be supportive of some type of a state tax increase then, but until that I really wouldn't be. I've got employees and I've got children that are having, sometimes they have a tough time making ends meet too, and so I would like to see have our federal funds come back to the state, because I don't really know what we get out of our federal dollars that goes into the federal education system. I think that I would rather it come directly to the state, not have the strings attached, because I understand there's a lot of money that we don't get from the federal because there's so many strings attached to it, that so it stays in other states, and I'd like to see them strings be severed, and so that money just comes back to us, and that so that our state school board can decide how and when it should be distributed.
Great, thank you. We'll now take a short break and we'll come back for audience questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can come sit in the first 2 rows here. We have our 2 volunteers that will help you if you need help formulating your question or if you feel shy to ask it yourself. Our volunteers can help you with that. So we'll see you back in 10 minutes. 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Quick 5-minute break and we'll see you back in 5 minutes.